Introduce yourselves again. Can you introduce yourself again because for the video?
For sure, for sure. My name is Cecile Brown. I'm the communications manager for political affairs and climate at the Environmental Defense Fund.
Awesome.
Yourself, we really appreciate you doing this. So we can spread the word.
I actually have a slide deck. I don't know if the screen sharing the screen sharing permissions are on, but I have a slide deck just in case you guys want to show some stuff.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I don't know how to enable that.
You want to try to give me a host there, and I could try.
All right, but it's good. Stop the recording.
You should go over that. You should go in settings, and then
I'm just gonna share this. And you all, can just ask me questions, but I'll just leave this up here, or I can start with this, whatever you guys want to do.
You could start with your presentation, then we could ask questions after.
Okay, cool. So is the recording going again?
Yeah.
That's good. All right, my name's Cecile. It's great to be here tonight with you all. I'm joining from the East Coast, from Washington, D.C., but I'm the communications manager for political affairs and health at the Environmental Defense Fund. We're one of the big green orgs fighting, to make sure generations to come aren't affected by the climate crisis. So one of our big initiatives is what we're calling Power Up America. And really what we're doing is asking for Congress to help support 100% clean electricity, trucks, and buses, because that's going to make our communities healthier. It's going to help us create a healthier and stronger economy. And also it's just going to help protect generations to come from the extreme weather and extreme heat and everything that we're seeing happening today. So we're in a historic window to act on climate. I don't know if you guys are following politics at all, but the Biden-Harris administration, they're the most strongest administration that we've ever had on environmental and climate issues. Joe Biden has committed to, I think, a 50% reduction in GHG or carbon pollution by 2030. They've established an environmental justice White House Advisory Council. He's got one of the most diverse cabinets. Well, he has the most diverse cabinet ever in American history. But we're really just proud of all the work and all the actions and progress that the Biden-Harris administration has made so far on climate, because it's a super, super critical issue. We're talking about our lives, our everyday lives. You all are in high school, right? With maybe
we're all seniors. We're all seniors.
Yeah, you all are seniors, hoping, I know you guys want to graduate high school and live your own life and grow up and have your own kids maybe, or have your own job and have your own future. And right now we understand that climate change threatens all of that. But we've got a great opportunity with clean electricity. When we move to 100% clean power and electrifying our transportation sector, that'll help improve public health. It'll bring greater opportunities with job and infrastructure. And it's going to really help fight the disproportionate impacts of environmental justice. I don't know exactly, and I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what part of California you all live in. But for me, I live in Washington, D.C., and my community is distinguished as an environmental justice community. I live near one of the major city bus yards. So that means every morning, during certain times of the day, the air quality is really, really bad in my neighborhood because of the tailpipe pollutions that come from the buses. You guys know, in busy places like Los Angeles, California, Houston,
Yeah, we
Texas,
actually live in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so you guys know the impacts of, just medium to heavy duty trucks and buses and what that means for children's health, asthma rates, but also just the concentration of particulate matter and other things in the air that we breathe, at certain parts of the day. It's really tough and it brings adverse health effects. And we know that, these impacts, unfortunately, they impact Black and Brown communities worse than they do others. So that's why it's super important, that we get to the bottom of this so people can breathe safer and children don't have to suffer from asthma when we when we move to clean power and clean transportation. So altogether, transportation and electricity creates 50% of climate pollution. But I think transportation is actually a little bit higher. So transportation almost contributes like a third of pollution that we see in the air today. And honestly, I wish I had the breakdown of it all, because I think power and transportation are definitely a lot, but I also believe that, trash and other forms of pollution also create the climate pollution that we see in the air. But, the great opportunity that we have when we power up America means that we're creating jobs. Clean energy and clean transportation is going to help lead the economic recovery that we're seeing right now. I know we're all kind of suffering from the cost of inflation, gas prices. All of these things are affected by the world market, right? That's kind of, if you would say, like at the will of other European countries. You think of like the war in Ukraine and the Ukraine crisis right now. That's a main part of why the gas prices were so high. But think of it on the other side. If we had more clean energy, more solar, more wind, and more water power in the US that we were generating ourselves, we wouldn't be affected as much by crises that happen in other countries, because we would have more energy independence when we're creating our own renewable energy right here in our country. So investing in electric trucks, buses, cars, and clean energy, right, is going to create millions of jobs. This isn't for just the people who work at the utility company, right? But this is for bus drivers. This is for people who might be building the parts on the buses. This is for people who might be working on the assembly line to build the clean trucks and buses. Generally, when we research what this clean energy transition is going to take, it's going to take more jobs. It's going to take people having to move from other jobs into new emerging green technologies. And that's a win. That's a win for our country. So yeah, with the right policies in place, we can get to clean trucks, buses, and clean energy, right? That's going to help lower income or income qualified companies. That's going to mean Indigenous communities and communities of color will also have access to more jobs. But we've got to make sure that we're having a just transition, right? How are we making sure that people who work in the fossil fuel industry will be able to have jobs that move into the green industry? So right now, on average, green jobs pay 25% more. It's one of the nation's strongest growing sectors before COVID-19. And clean energy jobs were growing 70% faster than the regular economy as a whole from 2015 to 2019. So yeah, if we power up America, that means we'll have more jobs in America, because the trucks, the buses, the solar panels, just a general infrastructure, right? We think about the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed in November last year. That created a whole network of electric vehicle chargers in the United States. So eventually, when we transition into the clean energy economy with clean trucks and buses, folks will be able to charge their cars and trucks just like they gas up their cars and trucks on the highway. And so that's going to mean more jobs too. So yeah, we can't afford to not lead in these sectors, right? Automakers are going to spend a lot of money developing new electric models. The market is just, right now, it's really huge. We're seeing companies like Ford, they're selling out of these electric cars, right? And they haven't even started producing them. So the demand is there. People really like electric vehicles. They understand that when they have electric vehicles, they won't necessarily have to pay a ton of money at the pump to fill their cars up. And so we're just, I think overall, even in the last year, we're just seeing the market completely transform and move to EVs. So yeah, what's another kind of startling fact about the issue and the problem, and why there's a really, really great opportunity to electrify the trucking sector specifically, is that there's only all of the trucks in the nation, I think they're only 5% of all the trucks in the US are heavy duty trucks, but they commit 95% of all the pollution that's happening. And so, if we continue to kind of invest in the system that we already have, we're giving money kind of to other companies, right? If we don't really start thinking about how we're going to transition to the clean energy future, we're kind of, letting other countries continue to dominate in the manufacturing industry. So this is just more headlines talking about how the investments are growing jobs and growing the economy throughout the country, specifically for places like Michigan, right, who used to really be kind of like the manufacturing hub and heart of the country with the auto industry. This is kind of their biggest opportunity to come back and continue to grow jobs. So yeah, our health, one of the other great big benefits about electrifying the power sector and the transportation sector is public health. So public health really stands a chance to really benefit. When we think about even just transportation and the pollution that comes from tailpipes from like cars and trucks, that's just one part of the conversation. Think about the coal fire plants that are actually like producing our electricity. Think about petrochemical plants that are producing plastic water bottles and plastic bags. Think about factories that make plastic parts and use plastic. All these things are burning fossil fuels, and the pollution that's coming from burning those fossil fuels is what's causing climate change and what's harming our health. So in generally, if we can move to clean energy, right, if we can figure out how to get our buildings, all of our manufacturing systems, transportation, if we can figure out how to power all these things from clean energy sources, that's going to mean less pollution in the air, right? So that's going to mean less contributions to climate change, and that's going to make our air cleaner and our water safer and the land safer. So the transportation and power sectors, especially diesel trucks and buses and coal-fired power plants, right? They're a top source of that harmful pollution that we were talking about. So cleaning up the power and transportation sector is going to save a bunch of lives. It's going to reduce children's emergency rooms for asthma every year, and it's going to avoid 15 million lost work days a year. And so what we were talking about before, the reason why environmental justice, I think, is kind of like just a hot topic. And I think one reason why we really want to commend the Biden-Harris administration for all the progress that they've made so far is really trying to address the harmful legacy of pollution. I know y'all are in the 12th grade, but we all know like it was just not too long ago that the Civil Rights Act was signed into law, right? Where that offered everybody the equal right to vote. But studies have shown that historically, Black and Brown communities, right, they've only been able to afford or be approved for mortgage loans in certain communities in certain areas. And unfortunately, we're seeing that the trends are that ever since, segregation has been happening, also this toxic kind of history of redlining and, communities, Black and Brown communities being near coal-fired plants, being near trash dumps, being near bus yards. It's not a coincidence, right? The system was kind of set up like this. And so 100%. Yeah. And so we're seeing that, now the Biden-Harris administration is really trying to take a stand and make some commendable actions to fix this. They have an initiative called Justice 40, which I think, number one, establishes like an environmental justice expert in every branch of the government, which I think is really important. But it also helps make sure that 40% of all the benefits of the clean energy investments and investments that are being made are going to disproportionate let me say that again, I'm talking fast. So Justice 40 basically is an initiative by the Biden-Harris administration, which means that 40% of all the benefits of these investments in climate change, and really I think of all the benefits that the government is making and infrastructure in general, are going to go to underserved communities, right? 40% of these benefits are going to go directly to the people who have been disproportionately exposed to these harmful pollutants. So this is just going on a little bit about EDF and our Power Up America goals, but you all know EDF is a nonprofit organization. So some of the work that we do is actually lobbying Congress to vote for and support our initiatives like clean energy and clean cars. So what we're asking for is 100% clean electricity, by 2035. We're asking for new trucks and buses to be zero emitting by 2040. We're asking for cars to be zero polluting by 2035. And we're looking to have 500,000 vehicle charging stations built by 2030. So I think now we can already see one of those is scratched off the list. The charging stations, the Biden-Harris administration, they passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that establishes funding for these 500 vehicle charging stations, but we still need the full funding from Congress to get us to 100% clean electricity and 100% clean cars and trucks. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing just a huge transformation in the trucking industry. And right now, we believe that electric trucks is the greatest opportunity to like drastically cut this carbon pollution that's causing climate change. And this is just more information showing like that the trend for clean energy is already there. We're already seeing cities like where I live, Washington, D.C., commit to 100% clean electricity. Big cities like Seattle and Washington, Portland, Oregon, some of these really big cities are already committing to 100% clean electricity. So we're just calling for it to be a national standard. So yeah, we're just showing that this is possible. These are, not only are they emerging technologies, but they're technologies that can be duplicated. And right now, solar and wind and a lot of these renewable energy sources are a lot cheaper than what we're already used to burning. So yeah, we're just asking for more policy asks on clean transportation that'll support domestic manufacturing, give more tax incentives for folks so they can afford electric vehicles, and just make sure that the funding is equitable and it's going to all communities the same and not just one community over the other. Same thing for clean power. We're looking for tax credits for solar and wind to make them more affordable, establish tax credits for us to be able to store the renewable energy a little bit better. And yeah, we're looking to double funding for the research and development of the new renewable energy technologies. So yeah, we have a long history, right, of tackling big challenges. The US does, and climate change is no different. So that's why we're asking for Congress to adopt these policies today. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much.
That was amazing. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thanks, guys. I hope you all
Really good
got to learn something new. And I think right now the cool thing is that clean energy and environmental justice is kind of a trending topic.
Yeah.
But the sad part about it is that we still have like two parties in Congress kind of fighting over the right thing to do. And I think y'all are the future. Y'all are going to be the next presidents. Y'all are going to be the next major scientists to break through with this cool technology to get us past this crisis. And so as much as sometimes I want to like duck in a corner and hide and complain, we really, really just look to y'all because y'all are the future, right? And you all will be voting soon. And I think now is just the time, we have this really historic window to make something happen because, this is serious business.
Yeah, definitely serious. Like this whole project was each group had to find a huge issue that around the world, around the community, and we chose this topic, global warming, because we think it's so important and it doesn't get like that much light shed on it sometimes. Like, of course, you hear about it, you don't know exactly what it is. That's why even the questions we got, they're just from they're very basic questions, but they're just from students like around our school. Like we asked, what do you want us to ask? And then we wrote them down. So we have like a list of questions. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like some of the questions are so basic. It's kind of crazy. We don't even learn about it in school sometimes.
Yeah.
Aaron, would you like to start?
You guys want to ask me questions now too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask if I heard like another power source, but it's not like too popular. Like I know like electric is like the next big thing, but I heard of also like biofuel or something.
Yeah. So I think biofuel is one of those technologies. So at EDF, I don't know if I think we do have a team that's like doing research on how to turn like stuff like cow poop and like old leaves and like algae blooms and things that people get rid of, like how to turn that into
Yeah, waste.
biofuel. But I'm not sure like how far along the technology has gotten. It's not really like an expert area in what we do at EDF, but I do know like big companies, like big fossil fuel companies like Shell, have already committed to like a certain percentage of their stuff, like turning it into biofuel and like turning it into like more renewable resources. But
Yeah.
honestly, I think with some of these big companies, we really have to be mindful to like do the research and make sure that they're not greenwashing. You all know like the fossil fuel industry is a huge industry. They make like over 600 like $billion a year. And I think the US gives about 200 billion dollars of like taxpayer money a year to like subsidize these fossil fuel companies. So we really have to be mindful and we really have to hold them accountable because, you know, I think it's one thing to say like, hey, we're committing to doing this, we're committing to doing better, we're committing to moving away from fossil fuels, but
It's
the next
actually
part
doing
is,
it. Yeah.
yeah, is actually holding them accountable, right? Is like actually making sure they're doing what they say, because just like cigarettes, unfortunately, the fossil fuel industry are just one of those things where they know they've been doing wrong and they know that the product that they sell has been contributing to climate change, but it's a necessity and it's makes people so much money, right? That a lot of times the disadvantages get overlooked.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Right.
Okay, Aaron, you want to start with the other first question?
Oh, the first question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me look for it. I accidentally closed it. It was oh yeah, it was like our first question was just asking like what is global warming? Like really?
Mhm. Yeah, so some people say use the term global warming, some people use the term climate change. But really global warming is basically just the rate at which the climate has been getting hotter and hotter, I think, since we've been really tracking the temperature and like the extreme weather events. So I think over like the past 50 to maybe 80 years, there's just been this ongoing trend where the average temperature of like the whole entire planet keeps going up and up and up. And so I don't know if you guys have heard of the Paris Accord, the Paris Climate Agreement. So you remember when the last president, I'm not even going to say his name, took us out of the Paris Accord. The Paris Accord basically is an agreement between pretty much 90% of all the countries in the world. I think there's only a few countries that aren't in the Paris Accord. But basically they're agreeing to do everything that it takes to get the climate from warming over 2 degrees Celsius. So I think that's from like the baseline temperature, which might be like the 1900 temperature. Don't quote me. I don't know the like exact
Yeah.
science, but basically the Paris Accord is trying their hardest to not make sure that the climate warms a full 2 degrees Celsius. And so that's basically what climate change is. It's just like the rate of the temperature of the atmosphere, it keeps getting warmer. You know, like the Arctic shelves are kind of starting to melt. The sea level is rising because the Arctic is getting hotter. And so that's kind of that's what climate change or global warming is.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, and then the next question we got was, what impact does global warming have on our planet, and how does it affect us in our everyday lives?
For sure. So I think we talked about this a little bit before, but global warming, the effect on the planet is like this could be catastrophic if we don't get this together by 2030.
Mhm.
IPCC, which is like a part of the United Nations, if you guys Google the IPCC report that just came out like last week, is basically saying that, look, we know this is a problem. If we don't get to zero emissions or net zero carbon pollution by 2030, like there's going to be catastrophic damage, which could mean something like, you know, Miami or New Orleans might be underwater, or we're talking like, you know, a catastrophic like hurricane or storm. But basically, how climate change affects us is kind of the extreme weather you guys have seen. We've seen wildfires, we've seen drought. I think California is going through a historic drought right now. These are all
Correct.
impacts of the climate change and global warming.
Okay. Our next question is, what is the main contributor of global warming?
Okay, so I think that depends on who you ask. So we'll just keep it in context of like the US, but basically, well, maybe we'll do a global thing too. So in the US, right, we're only like 5% of the population of the whole entire world, but we contribute 20% of the world's emissions. Like we're only 5% of the population, but we contribute like, it might be even more than that, but we contribute a lot of the world's pollution. Then if you think about it just in context of the United States, transportation is our largest contributor to climate change. Transportation emits the most carbon into the atmosphere. And like we were talking about before, like single passenger cars and everyday cars that we drive, they contribute to it, but really it's heavy duty trucks and buses. Those are like the main contributors of transportation. And then the second largest contributor to climate change is electricity, is running your HVAC, running electricity in your home and commercial buildings. That's the second highest contributor to GHG emissions in the US.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the next question we have over here is, what are ways we can prevent it in our everyday lives?
For sure. So little things that you can do in your everyday lives, you can do some really small things and then you can do some really big things. So some of the small things you could do, right, is just doing things like making sure you turn your lights off when you leave the room, turning the faucet off when you brush your teeth, maybe washing your clothes in cold water instead of washing your clothes in hot water. That burns a lot less electricity. You can do things like unplug all your appliances, things you don't use around your home. And the funny thing about that is like when you reduce your consumption of electricity, think about it, you're reducing your power bill. So you can save a little money. Some bigger things that you can do is plant more trees, plant trees in your community, in your neighborhood. Bigger things you could do is plan a community cleanup or, encourage your family and friends to think about when they litter and how they can be better stewards of their environment. Other things you can do is call your senator or call your congressman and tell them to support 100% clean electricity and support 100% clean cars and trucks. Also, you can, learn from other people in your community, elders in your community. I know there's a lot of people in like Los Angeles who fight for environmental justice issues, who've been affected by asthma or have been affected by extreme weather. And I think it's also important to, learn your community and what issues affect your community and advocate with your like city and state and local lawmakers is just as important as talking to your congressman or calling your senator's office. I would also say one thing that you can do, which is kind of controversial, and I can't tell y'all to do this, but there is a lot of great climate benefits in like limiting how much meat you eat. A lot of Americans, and we eat like a lot of chicken, a lot of beef, a lot of processed foods. And that also contributes a lot to like how much climate pollution goes in the air. And so, they say moving to more of a plant-based diet can also help the environment.
Yeah, of course. And then the next question we have is, hypothetically, if we don't care and we just continue with global warming, it gets really bad, what's the worst outcome of it?
Yeah, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I don't know, y'all. We become climate nomads. Like, it's bad out here.
Literally.
You guys know there's like wildfires. There's not a lot of water. Like,
yeah, it also contributes to natural disasters too, right? And like droughts and all that. Yep.
Yep, droughts, water, wildfires, hurricanes, those are all things that contribute, that are impacts of climate change. I mean, it could get kind of bad out here. I mean, sea level rise is already a thing.
Yep.
So it could get kind of bad out here. Like, I don't know about you guys, but you know, I want to live past 2030. So yeah, I mean, I don't like to get sucked into doom, because honestly, I think a lot of the technology, and honestly, people want this issue. Like, a lot of people support clean energy. It's just unfortunately just where we are in politics right now. Um, but I think, you know, what's the worst that can happen? Unfortunately, we won't, you know, be able to live anymore. That's the worst that could happen. But I think there's a lot of great opportunities when we think about fixing this, getting ahead of the climate crisis.
Yep. Okay, and then here's another question. Some people might say, I'm just one person. How much change can I make? Why is this the wrong mentality?
Yep. I'm just one person. I can't fix this. I mean, technically, there's some truth to that, right? But I think there's power in numbers. If you think about it, you know, people who want to do good outnumber the people who want to do bad. And I think, you know, the biggest thing that you can do, the biggest impact that you can make, when it comes to like big policy changes and actually like changing the system, is standing up for yourself, and it is voting. Like, a lot of people say like, oh, this doesn't impact me, or you know, they don't care anyways. But I don't think that's true. I think if you get educated, or you know, if you learn who your city council person is, or if you learn like who, you know, your sheriff is in your county, like these are people who you vote and people who you can put in power. Maybe not you guys if you're not 18 and can't vote, but maybe for your parents. But I think that's really just an example of how your one voice can really make an impact, you know, if you make your voice heard. I also think that if we think about things like just the intersection of environmental justice and racial justice, like the United States has a long history, right, of creating a system that doesn't work or doesn't serve everybody fairly.
Mhm.
And I think we're finally getting to a point where people are waking up and realizing that we can't continue to live like this anymore. We can't continue to accept this as the normal. And I think that, you know, when folks start to make their voice heard, it becomes a thing that you just can't ignore. When we think about things like, you know, January 6th and what happened with that, it's like, it was crazy, right? For people to have to watch that on TV. And now it's like, we're finally seeing people be held accountable. Or if you think about, you know, George Floyd being murdered by a police officer, that really like told a story to the country, like, hold up, wait a minute, this guy tried to use a fake dollar bill and ended up dying in the street from, you know, like a thirsty cop. So I think, unfortunately, these types of events kind of show us that we don't have to stand up and accept it, right? If Martin Luther King and folks could fight to get their right to vote, like, why can't we fight to make sure clean energy and climate change gets fixed so we can continue to live our lives?
100%. Okay, I only have a couple more questions. Why is it important to spread the word of global warming?
It's important to spread the word of global warming because the way that we live our lives, it's all at risk. So if you think about climate change, and just like we were talking about the IPCC report, one alarming thing about the IPCC report is basically that they're saying that like biodiversity and the health of the planet is kind of dying. So if you think about kind of how we live our lives, like if the bees stop flying, or if, you know, we can't grow things like oranges or say avocados, you know, stop growing in places, like that's going to majorly disrupt the food chain. And we're already seeing it happen with like the inflation prices and with drought. You know, these are not only affecting people's daily lives, because these are farmers and people who go to work every day. If the crops aren't growing, then there's no food for people, and there's also no jobs. So it's creating a lot of problems. But also it's just important because you know, I live in Washington, D.C., and it's in the summer, it's just like brutally hot. It's like, who wants to walk outside during a heat wave? Like, it's
Yeah.
crazy. And then same thing in the cold. It's like, my parents live in Michigan, and some days it's too cold to like even go outside. And so we're seeing that the weather is just getting more extreme and more extreme and more extreme. And just talking about environmental justice issues, if you think about places like Miami or New Orleans that, they very often experience like extreme weather events like hurricanes and stuff, how hard it is for families to have to relocate, or for families, to have to repair their home after a storm or a hurricane. These are really environmental justice issues and racial issues, because a lot of these communities, they're purposely put in places that are going to have to deal with these issues, and they don't have the resources to address them.
Okay, and then the second to last question is, why are you so passionate about this, and how did you get into it?
I'm so passionate about climate change because I really feel like climate change is just another way. Fixing climate change is just another way we can really get to like a more just racial society. I think that climate change is a really great opportunity to start to address not only like environmental injustices, but equity in general. Using climate change and using the transition to 100% clean energy is going to be able to bring more jobs, more economic opportunity, but also modernize our communities and the way people live so that we all can live better lives. How did I get started? Okay, so I really wasn't an environmentalist when I like first started like college, or I wasn't really passionate about environmentalism until 2014. My parents, 2014. So my parents are